ICSE warriors, welcome back to my channel. My name is PrachiSharma and today is a very interesting session. This session is based upon a lot of queries I get from parents as well as students. So, students tell me that, ma'am, we prepared everything very well. We studied a lot, and in the answers we made sure that we wrote everything we knew, but still we did not get the marks we deserved. Maybe the examiner was not happy with us, and he or she got a hard marking. They were very strict in marking my answer script. So, to address all of that, let me start with understanding what ICSE board is looking. Now, ICSE board has a very standard marking scheme. Now, is that standard marking scheme strict or easy or lenient? So, it's neither of those. It is based upon a very simple set of rules. All the examiners get a set of rules that they are supposed to follow for each and every answer and each and every part of it. They cannot and will not deduct marks for any portion that you have written correctly, but they are just feeling like, let's be strict with the student. No, that does not happen. For under every group of examiners, we have a group leader who takes a call on any particular answer that maybe the student has attempted extra, or the student has, given a lengthy answer or extra information or any conflicting answers. In that case, the group leader will take the final call. So, for you to understand this, the ICSE board has a very simple standard pattern. They are neither strict nor lenient. You follow the exact rules that your question paper is asking you to. And if you do so, you will not lose marks. So, one thing that you can keep in mind while answering your questions, make sure that you read the question thoroughly, you see every part of it, and make sure that your answers carries every information that the question is asking you for. So once you complete your answer script, towards the end when you revise your answer sheet, make sure that you're revising and comparing whether your answer contains everything that you need to, comparing it with the question directly. So I hope you understand that. In this session, what my motto is to make sure that wherever you are lacking, you are able to address those areas and take notes and start practicing in enhancing your answer scripts. And I'll make sure that whatever guidelines I give you, you are able to make a better answer, and you're able to score better. So that is my motive from this video. As we go forward, I will be sharing a few answer scripts from toppers as to how they framed their answers and they ended up getting great marks. Now, my suggestion would be that as I'm going through those answer scripts, make sure that you're paying attention to the details of the answer, how the answers are framed, what is a key point mentioned there, and how the entire answer script is looking like. Another important thing is that your motive as a student should be that your answer script is the easiest answer script for the examiner. Now, look at things from an examiner perspective. He or she is going through a lot of answer scripts in the day. Now, if I am a student who has haphazardly given information, will the examiner have enough patience and stamina to figure out my answer, go to different pages, find different parts of the question, and then grade me? Of course, the examiner would end up doing some bit of it, but there is a high chance that you may lose marks because the examiner was not able to locate your answer. Okay, so your motive as a student is to make sure your answer script is laid out neatly. When I say neatly, I'm not saying beautiful handwriting. Okay, not everybody has the most beautiful handwriting out there. So no matter what type of handwriting you have, at least you can write it clearly and neatly. If your handwriting is very small, you can give enough spacing between lines, that is between answers, and make sure that your answer script looks a better laid out format. Okay, So if your answer script is better laid out, every answer and parts are together mentioned, okay, and you have no cutting or bulky information, unnecessarily lengthy answers, then there's a high chance that you will get the best marks that you deserve as per your knowledge. So even if you are a student who has a lot of information, who has studied very well, but you end up writing haphazardly and giving a lot of information in the answer which was not even required, then there's a high chance you may end up losing marks because it was not very well presented and the teacher or the examiner was not able to derive your answers and understand, okay, what is the student trying to say. Okay, so make sure that you pay attention as we go forward and look at these different answer scripts and understand and take notes on how you can improve your answer sheets. So let's get started. So students, these are some of the toppers answer scripts that you can see on the screen. For every portion, we'll check out a few details as to what really made a difference for this particular student. So, if we start with this first one, a lot of portions from this may not be in your syllabus this year, so make sure that you're not paying attention on what is the answer, but how it is framed out. So, let's start with this first one. So, in this first one, if you see, the student has clearly given out the initial information, and after that, just one second, and after that, he has given very neatly an equation, if you see right here, and then after adequate space he or she has mentioned a few more sentences and also given the structure of the compound. Now important takes from this particular answer is, after writing the first information in which the student told exactly what the reaction is going to represent, the reaction and this information has a spacing of a line. Now, I have noticed this a lot in majority of toppers answer scripts is that they make sure that their equation has proper spacing from the top and proper spacing from the bottom of the answer. Another thing is that you should be giving the name of the compound that you're writing the formula for. For example, in this case, this compound name is written. Other compound names are not written, but my suggestion is always to write the names of all the compounds. So, a couple of things that we understood here is proper spacing before and after the equation, then writing the name of the compound in the equation. Another thing here is that when you see these three lines here, if you think from an examiner's perspective, he or she may not have to read the entire thing and they can directly see the key points that are underlined by the student to make sure this answer is easier for the examiner to decipher and understand what the student is trying to tell me. Okay. Now, another thing is when he or she has made this compound, a lot of students, so for example, when we practice generally, how do we make our organic compounds? We would directly write CCC, right? Or if you're making a ring, then you will just write make a ring like this. So what is the difference in this one? You lose marks for that, by the way. If you do this, you lose marks for that because your compound is not balanced from all the sides. So you have to make sure that, especially for organic compounds, wherever you're supposed to add all the hydrogens, you are adding them, because if you do not do that, you do lose marks for it. So even if, let's say, you wrote the initial part, gave this equation, you gave this information also, but in the compound of your cyclohexane, you ended up not writing the hydrogens, you end up losing a mark there because this compound is not the correct compound. So it's not that you lose half a mark because your hydrogens were not balanced. You lose a complete mark because this is not the exact compound they were looking for. Okay. Now let's move on to the second one. Now, if you look at the second sheet, now my motive of adding this sheet was so that you can understand very clearly. Now, if you just take a look at this page, you would clearly understand that there is some reaction happening in which you have cations and anions. Somebody is losing electrons, somebody is gaining electrons, and a compound is being formed, right? So this information is clearly coming by just looking at the answer script. So try and think from an examiner perspective again. When you look at this page, aren't you getting every information that you need for this particular answer? You're not missing out anything, right? Second important thing I mentioned this sheet in this discussion was that the person did make mistake, right? The student made a mistake at this line and also in this line, right? But did the student just randomly scribbled the entire page? No. There are a lot of students that if I made a mistake here, they will scribble right like this. Okay, they'll make sure that it's not visible at all to the teacher what mistake I made. Okay, so important part for you to understand is the teacher does not care what mistake you made. Their focus is on what you wrote clearly. So when you make mistake in the answer script, do not make the answer script ugly by scratching all through the page. Okay, just draw one single line. That is also acceptable. In this case 2-3 lines are fine, so 2 lines are fine. Do not make the answer script like somebody just scribbled all through the page and you are a very young kid. You're not a kid, you're a 10th grader. So make sure you are mature enough in accepting that yes, I made a mistake. I just just cross it out and then I do it correctly. Okay, another thing is that I have seen a lot of students that they do not like leaving lines in between. For example, you have a line spacing here, line spacing here, line spacing here. A lot of students don't like leaving line spacing and they try to make sure that everything is written together and very close. So writing close can work very well when you're writing theoretical answers. But when you're mentioning equations, when you're doing anything from chemical bonding, making the formula, showing the electron dot structure, it is important to have proper spacing between your written answers. Okay? Like for example, in this one, very clearly the person has shown with an arrow the movement of electrons. Okay, so you can very clearly understand that the student knows the content, they knows the answer for this question, and hence it becomes an easier answer script for the examiner to correct and give you marks. Okay, now let's move on. In this one, if you see, my another tip is to always try, for whatever answer possible, try to break down your answer into points instead of giving a full paragraph. It is always good practice to give the answer in points. For example, in this case the student is trying to give the properties for quicklime CaO. Okay, so he or she is trying to give the properties of quicklime. So if you see, the student has given out points, bullet points, so it becomes very easy, very well representation of the answer, and very low chances of losing marks in this. Even if you know the exact same information but you end up writing a big paragraph for it, the teacher may or may not be able to go through all the points that you have mentioned. Okay, so it is always good practice to make sure that your answer is laid out in points. Another important thing for ICSE board is that, and especially whatever I'm telling in this session is related to chemistry and not any other subject for ICSE. So for chemistry, they are looking for exact, crisp, and you can say point to point answer. They are not looking for lengthy or extra bulky answers. They are looking for direct information from you. An important thing is about key points. That is, let's move on to the next one. I think I have the key points mentioned somewhere else also. Anyways, we'll come on that. Now, for example, in this one, this was a theoretical answer, right? Even though this is a theoretical answer, the student made sure that all the information was very well laid out. He or she did not try to make active passive sentences and unnecessarily make the answer longer. Okay, the student knew that for Mendeleev this is the answer that he's supposed to write, so he gave it very crisp and very you can say accurate information. Same thing is for the second part. This is a theoretical answer, very short and crisp and containing all the information required without missing any important point. So when I say crisp answer, I do not mean you lose out important information. You are supposed to mention all the important information in the best possible way. So make sure your answers are crisp, up to the mark but contain all the information that the question is asking you. Now, let's move on to this question, 17th one, if you can see. Now, in this question, this is an equation based question. There is no theory asked in this question, only equations are asked. But even if you look at the equation, you get a lot of information from this answer. You get that this is an aqueous form, this is a solid form. You also get that this is a gas that you're getting, and you also get the name of the compound that is being made here, as well as your equation is balanced out. Correct? So, even if you're giving just the equation, do not try to skip all of these information. I understand, okay, you can skip the information that these are aqueous, solid, or gaseous if not asked in the question. But if it is asked, you are supposed to mention it. Second important thing is that if there's any condition for this particular reaction, you are supposed to mention the equation. If you skip the condition required for this equation, you will lose marks. Because as per ICSE board, an equation is considered a complete equation if number 1, it has all the reactants and products. Number 2, it is balanced. And number 3, it has the catalyst or the required conditions for your reaction to take place. If you have these 3 informations in your equation, you will not lose marks. But if you end up skipping even one part of it, you do lose marks. Okay? Let's move on. Now, for example, if you look at, and this is a different student's answer script. Now, if you look at this particular first answer, you can see that this equation has everything required for the teacher to understand that you have studied well and you know your subject. For example, water, the student has mentioned H2O, the student has mentioned the name of the compounds, the condition over and below the arrow, and everything is clearly visible. Even if your handwriting is not super pretty, still you can make sure that you're writing clearly, you're leaving enough spaces, and your answer is readable. Okay? Do not make very small handwritings. At least make them readable for the teacher. Let's move on. Now, if you look at this one, this is from electrolysis. Now, if you try and understand this one, the student has clearly highlighted what is happening in the reaction, what is happening at anode, at cathode. Everything is clearly visible to you. Just zoom out and look at the layout of this answer. Okay, the answer is laid out pretty well. So, if you get an answer question from electrolysis, don't randomly give information that this is happening at cathode, this is happening in anode. Try to make sure that you practice the way the answer is laid out. Given the basic information that is happening in the question, that the question has asked, then what is happening at anode, what is happening at cathode, what you're getting at the end, what is your final equation. You're supposed to mention everything. Now, once we move on to this one, okay, so this is the one that I told you about, key points. Now, this question is completely theoretical question. The student knew very well that this is gonna be a long answer. Okay, so even when the answer is pretty long, still you can see proper spacing, so nothing is super congested. Second thing, you can see the key points underlined. In ICSE, your key points are very, very, very important. Okay, even if your answer explanation is not very clear, but you have your key points mentioned and you have them underlined, there's a high chance you would still get the marks for it. So, if you see, the student has highlighted by underlining the key points. You can see the key points. Then the student also tried to break the answer into points. Okay, so theory, then couple of points. Another important thing about this particular answer that I like is that it's not necessary that you give equations as the example always. Sometimes just giving an example like this makes a huge impact on your answer. Okay, so the student is just trying to explain that if you have baking soda and you end up adding tartaric acid to it, you get baking powder. So even if the student does not know the exact information for that, or it's not in the syllabus, but still the student ended up giving an equation in this particular format, which really impacted the way the answer was laid out, the answer was framed. It really impacted the way. So I hope you are able to understand all of that. Then, if you look here again, just three sentences, but the student has still highlighted about 3-4 words. And as a teacher, I'm easily able to figure out what the question is asking and what the student has laid out for me, and I can easily give him marks. Now, let's move on to the next page. So, for example, in this case, now this is the exact way I always prefer the students write their equations in. So, three things I told you about. First thing, your reactants and products are mentioned. Second thing, your balancing is there, so it's balanced out. Everything is balanced out. Third thing, your condition is mentioned. Okay, and this fourth point is really up to you, but it does make a difference for the teachers. For example, let's say you are at about 98-99% score. Okay, and you have not mentioned these. Okay, the teacher may deduct marks, because if you get 100% mark in your answer script, it becomes a perfect answer sheet. And if your answer sheet is perfect as per the norms, if it is considered a perfect answer sheet, then they are supposed to release it online. Okay, so if they are releasing your answer script and it is not perfect, in that case they can avoid doing that by cutting a couple of marks here and there, just to make sure that your answer script does not come under the perfect score. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Again, you can see key points marked out. Then in this one, if you see, this is again a proper answer in which you had x, y, z, then an equation was asked, and then some theories written there. So when the x was asked, so you get a lot of such questions in your examinations. Another important thing here is that the student has clearly highlighted that this is answer number 3 that started. So it is completely up to you how you distinguish between your answers. Either you leave 2 lines in between, either you draw a line in between, or third, you highlight your answer numbers above it very clearly, that this is where my third answer is starting. So it is completely up to you what works best for you in dividing and giving proper spacing between your answers. Now, next part important for this is that you get a lot of questions in which you're supposed to identify X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, D compounds. So, how you're supposed to write them? See, very clearly the student has mentioned the alphabet for it, space, the name for it, and then also the formula for it. An important thing for you to understand is that if you give just the formula, it is not an acceptable answer. Please, please, please do not write that as an answer. You lose marks if you write only the formula. Okay, so no formula names or compound formulas are acceptable as answers. You are supposed to give in a proper name for the compound. Along the compound name, you can give the formula, but if you give just the formula, not acceptable in ICSE. Now, let's move on to the next one. Now, if you see very clearly, the student has mentioned the condition. The equation is balanced out. You have reactants and products very clearly visible. Now, moving on to the next one. Again, if you see answer 6, very clearly highlighted that answer 6 has started. Now again, you get a very good example of how you're supposed to frame out your equations. A proper line spacing from the top, a proper line spacing from the bottom, and you have the equation written out very clearly. Okay, with the condition mentioned also. Now, let's move on. Let's see. Is there anything else in this? Again, between two answers, you have the highlighted answer number 7 starting from here, and then you have a very well written equation and very well written theoretical part. Now, in this theoretical parts also, the paragraph is mentioned, but the key points are highlighted. You have to understand this, that these answer scripts are of 3 different students, but one common thing that you have seen in these answer scripts is that proper line spacing, very neatly and clearly written equations, and underlining the key points. What are the key points? Anything that makes your answer different. For example, you have a particular definition. the key word for the definition would be how you're explaining it. And those keywords are clearly mentioned in the book. So those keywords are supposed to be written in definitions and explanations. Without those equations, your answers are not valid answers or acceptable answers. Now, let's look at this theoretical answer. A complete theoretical answer of a whole page. This is a whole sheet for the student, okay? But even then, you have very neat and spaced out words. Nothing is like crumbled up or going and, going into each other, or very crumbled handwriting. No, very clear and neatly written. Key points are underlined very clearly. The teacher, if you see, one thing in this one is the teacher has corrected or put out tick marks on the key points. The teachers are looking for your keywords. So the teacher has clearly marked your keywords. So that is one thing that you can really note here, that if you are mentioning keywords, there is a high chance your teacher won't even read the whole answer, and they will make sure that they pick up the keywords and give you the marks. Okay, so by underlining keywords, you are making sure that you are not losing marks by making the teacher maybe read through it and find some mistake in your answer. Okay, so make sure that you're paying attention on that. Now, after this, I have a few points to remember for you students. So make sure that you can, if you want, you can pause the video and take a screenshot of this. This is everything that we have discussed today. So let's just quickly go through them. The first is compound formulas not accepted as answers. You are supposed to make sure that you are putting in the name for the compound. The second important thing is remember to balance the equations and mention the conditions for the reactions. Third, proper spacing between the answers. The teacher should clearly know that this is where your answer ended and this is where your next question has started. The fourth is underlining your key points. Okay. Number fifth is you may attempt an extra question if you have time. Now, this very few teachers tell you, and very few students are able to apply this. So, for example, you are supposed to attempt 4 questions out of 6, and you were able to do 4 of them, but you are not sure about one of your questions. You're thinking maybe I may end up losing 1 mark for it, but I still have some time. So, as per the rules of ICSE board, you can also attempt the whole question paper if you want. Okay, and you can also attempt 1 extra question if you would like. According to ICSE rules, if you have attempted an extra question, the marks that you get is for the best 4 questions. So, for example, you were supposed to attempt 4 questions, but you ended up attempting 5 questions. It's not as per CBSE. They will not cancel out the 5th question. No, they will correct all the 5 questions and you get marks for the top 4, the highest 4. It could be any 4 out of those 5. So, attempting an extra question is always a plus point for you. Okay, because if you have slight doubt that I may end up losing marks in this particular part, you can always attempt an extra question just to be on a safer side. Because if that question ended up giving you full marks and the first question you ended up losing 2 marks, you would still be at a better front because you will get the best 4 out of all those questions you have attempted. Okay, so this is a very, very good plus point for you. Let me highlight this. So this is a very, very important plus point. Make sure you share this tip with your friends and let them know that attempting an extra question is no problem as per ICSE board. Your school teachers may tell you don't do it. Your other teachers may tell you don't do it. But as per ICSE board, you can do it and you should do it. Okay, students, let's move on. So, your answers should be to the point and crisp. Don't skip important information. So, why do I say these 2 points together? Because when I say write your answers crisp, students end up skipping important information. No, writing crisp answers means leaving out useless information, trying to make sure you're able to explain the teacher what the teacher is looking for in the answer and giving all the important information. Another thing is try to give maximum examples as equations. So this is just to make sure that your answer has an upper hand by giving an equations as an example. Now, next is try to break your answer into points. The more points you're able to put out, the better your answer formation is and better chance of getting good marks. Next is when you make a mistake, cross out neatly. Please be mature enough and cross out neatly. Accept that I made a mistake. This is my mistake, and then move on. Do not be like, oh, the teacher or the examiner should not know what I wrote here, and just tear out the whole page by scribbling over it. Don't do that. Don't try to use fancy language. So, even if you are able to explain to the teacher everything in your own language, it is fine, it is acceptable. You are not supposed to write exact bookish language or try to use fancy words. They do not give you marks, okay? They cannot get you marks. If your answer is correct, it is correct, that's it. So don't waste your time in trying to write beautiful language. If you know the answer, try to write it out in as simple language as possible, mentioning the key points and not leaving out your keywords. Now, don't try to increase the length of your answer just for the sake of showing a long answer. This is very important for ICSE students because we have a habit of writing English literature answers, Shakespeare answers, stories. So we have a tendency to write longer answers. But for chemistry subject, unnecessarily do not try to increase the length of your answers. Whatever information is important for the question, make sure that you put that out and not try to increase the length by just putting active passive voices of the same sentence. I have seen those answer scripts. You cannot fool the examiner. They know what you're trying to do. So do not waste the time of the examiner. Try to make sure that your answer scripts are the easiest ones they correct that day, and they are the happiest by looking at a neat and tidy answer script that you have represented. So, my dear students, this is it for today's session. I hope and I am sure that this session was very helpful to you. Even if you have any doubts for any particular type of questions as to, ma'am, what or how much should I be writing for these questions, or is this way of writing or is that way of writing correct or not, you can ask that to me directly from the Telegram channel or by mentioning that in the comments box, and I will make sure that I address your doubts. And whatever answer scripts I have shared with you, make sure that you're taking inputs and trying to take notes as to how you can enhance your answers, and make sure that your answer script is the best answer script as per your knowledge. So make sure that you start making those changes in your writing from today itself. Make sure that you're practicing enough sample papers and writing down the answers every day. They really make a difference. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet, like and comment in the box if you have any doubt. Thank you so much, students. I hope you have a beautiful day today.